Hello and welcome to the Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet review. If you've played the last 3 or 4 Sword Art Online games, you've probably become used to a particular style of gameplay and story. Each game adds a slightly new set of features, like for Lost Song, it was the flight mechanic and magic. Hollow Realization revamped the skills tree and improved the sword play. However, all of that was tossed out the window for this game. Fatal Bullet is not any of those games, and it was never meant to be that way. It's a completely new game with a new developer, new engine, new setting, and a new story. This time, now that the seed has canonically arrived in the video game storyline of SAO, Kirito and his crew have entered Gun Gale Online too. Well, who really cares? Because you don't really play as them, at all. No, your story is your own this time. While this isn't the first time the series has allowed a custom player model, it is the first game in which Kirito is not the main character. Hell, he even barely shows up during the final boss fight. So yes, the promotional box, the promotional art, the box art, etc., is mostly there to increase sales. Now, I don't exactly blame them because it's a safety margin to have for such a radical new approach to the game series, but a little upsetting nonetheless. Now, I did say almost because SAO2, Kirito and Sinon versus Death Gun art does roughly reflect an hour of the game's content if you go a little slow. The section that allows you to play, I kind of use that term loosely here, the entire Phantom Bullet arc from SAO2 is called Kirito mode and is objectively the weakest part of the entire game. It feels shoehorned in at best because while yes, Kirito is logically the only one that can be used to investigate Death Gun from the perspective of the plot and the characters that you have, the inclusion of Sinon in this was obviously forced. In the anime, Sinon is already playing GGO to overcome her fear of guns and is one of the best at the game, so it's natural that she would be entering BOB. It's also logical that she has no idea who Kirito is because she's never met him. Fatal Bullet Sinon, on the other hand, is not that character at all. While part of her reason for playing Gun Gale is to overcome that fear of guns, the other and mostly major reason why she's playing this game is that the rest of her friends are playing as well. Her motivation doesn't naturally lead to her joining the DOB tournament because while she is good and she wants to be powerful, so is other characters like Yuki, Asuna, Leafa, the whole rest of the game pretty much. It also doesn't make sense why she fails to recognize Kirito, despite even Kirito saying that he'd be easily recognized by anyone who knows him, and literally everybody else in the game saying, that one is Kirito, after watching the tournament for like a whopping 5 minutes. So before we even get to the actual combat of this mode, it's already kind of dead, like, the illusion's broken. But compounding the issues that is just the general storytelling here is the issue that the tournament play isn't even redeeming or rewarding. Fight a total of like 4 times the mode, all in the same arena. Yet, despite the fact that in the anime it was presented as taking place in this like wide area of multiple environments, and despite the game having several mapped areas, you only get to fight in this tiny industrial zones from Solitary Sands to play at. I was really hoping that maybe we'd be able to get a little bit of the Battle Royale combat after having like these 2 really lame prelim fights, but just like the rest of the time spent in this mode, you just get visual novel type storytelling that sums up the fight for you. Also, depending on your playstyle, the fights are over in almost an instant. They're kind of like a brief introduction to the visual game for the visual novel type game, but like, if anything, it just your momentum's broken both ways. I'm gonna cover more of that, like the gameplay, like talk about the game AI later on. But simply put, it was just a waste of an hour, and if you really cared about what was happening, you just go watch SAO2. Like, it covers the same thing, but better. Now that I've got Kirito mode quickly covered, let's swap to what you'll actually be playing for a lot of the game. By a lot, I mean 33 out of the 34 hours that I have of the stream. Now, let's begin with the story. While I did enjoy it, I would say that the plot was a bit on the weaker side. You spend most of the game working towards getting inside the SPC Flugel, and because of this, once you finish that arc, it feels like there's little else to be done inside of the game. Despite Death Gun being brought up before you even finish this shit, before you even actually really get into it that much. There's such little weight put onto him that it would almost be acceptable if you forgot that Death Gun was even on like the cover of the game. I mean, for example, there's the scene in which your character and his or her group actually watch Death Gun shoot Exceed. But when Kirito goes to investigate, nobody even bothered to mention, by the way, we saw Death Gun. He had this cloak, he was about yee-high. Nope, they just seem not to be at all concerned about this. They also don't seem to care about Death Gun targeting top players, which the entire group is, despite them all, acting that way when it's first brought up. Also, the fact that your character watches Itsuki essentially shut down GGO, but then says absolutely nothing about it when everybody's talking about how weird that the shutdown was, is also just a bit odd. There were just some issues like those, details that were either overlooked or left out for convenience sake, that really hurt the storytelling. An additional weakness was also in the way that they presented the character. Zaliska's big reveal that she was an employee of Zaskar was into that way too much, and I pretty much had a guess from early on, almost at the beginning. Maybe this was also just a coincidence, but I also had Itsuki pinned as a villain from the very start. I mean, normally SAO villains tend to be straightforward, so Itsuki hit the mark in that regard, but in Fatal Bullet, the writers opted to try to aim for more of a plot twist, so he didn't really do a good job there. Lastly, Krea's character just fell apart at the end. For most of the game, she's this excited and slightly domineering person who really enjoyed playing with her childhood friend, but then suddenly she just flips switches and she just hates you. Now, I know it's written that her inferiority complex made her upset, then you throw in the whole Death Gun blackmail at the end, but it's not like a gradual change that you might expect, or her reasoning, she doesn't seem to follow through either direction there. It's just like, she never really seems to be bothered by it until she's suddenly unfriending everybody. And it just hurts because I really liked most of the companions, but there's just so many flaws by the end. It really killed off the excitement and like the dramatic emphasis throughout. My last bit regarding the story was the implementation of dialogue options. While I was never expecting BioWare-esque depth, I was reasonably assuming that the option you chose would make a difference. That wasn't really the case here, though. There were times where it clearly felt as if the dialogue was scripted towards the other dialogue options. For example, non-game related, if we were talking about a game of baseball and I said something about how one team was scoring a lot, you'd be given the option of saying, yep, those batters are doing a great job, and first base really needs to clean up those ground balls. Even if you chose the second option, my reply would be, I've never seen so many line drives before. Now, that's not a conversation. We'd just be two people talking past each other. Even worse is at various points, the writers seemed to be aware of this issue happening, and literally wrote in a combination of the two options. Going back to our previous example, no matter what you chose, my reply would be, those hits are rolling right past first. Those are great line drives by the batters. In that case, why did they even bother to prompt me for an answer? If the person I'm talking with is just going to repeat what I said, again, there's just details that were overlooked that kill it off. A minor note in relation to the story was also the regression of the romance system, or the infinity system. The new system introduced in Hollow Realization included the need to go on dates, having meaningful conversations, and really helped if you brought your intended partner into the field with you, because complimenting them really improved your status. However, in Fatal Bullet, it seemed like none of that was included. While I have nothing against preset interactions, my problem lies in the fact that I hit max affinity for Kreia and Rei without even knowing that it was happening. Affinity is increased by talking with characters when they have a green dialogue icon, but I assumed those meant for additional, minor storylines, how they were in Hollow Realization. And I believe it was also that way in Lost Song, but it's been a while since I've played it. Had this been a treat-the-focus game, I would have been furious, because the way I play, I stay with just Asuna for max affinity. But it was more of an annoyance this time around, because I liked Kreia and Rei, and I was playing as a whole new character. But once again, it's just one of those things that shouldn't have happened, but did. Moving on from just the story of the game, let's begin to talk about the visuals. I mentioned at the top of this review that Fatal Bullet got a new engine, the Unreal 4 engine, meaning that it should have had a graphical improvement across the board, which is typical with new engines, or at least expected with new engines. However, the problem with that is that not everything was treated fairly. There were moments, like with the in-engine cutscenes, that looked amazing and far better than the pre-rendered stuff, or what looked like pre-rendered stuff, from Hollow Realization. However, we also got a bit of a trade-off when it came to normal gameplay graphics. It didn't look like it really improved at all, and I play on a PS4 Pro, So I imagine there should have been something, even if it was just based off the upscaling from the PS4 Pro. But no. I also wanted to point out the overbearing shininess that encompasses everything. While part of GGO's like whole aesthetic is the glow of lights and mechanics, steampunk stuff, just cloth was being reflective, like cotton was being reflective, which is a no-no. It really turns off the realism there. The hair I could deal with, but not, the cloth. I'm not an expert developer, but I also do know that texture mapping, wrappings, whatever it's called, can really influence reflectiveness. You can materials have different reflectiveness. So I'm going to mark this down as just another detail missed. Also, I'm not really sure how bad it showed up during the recording, but some of the button prompts in the bottom right corner were actually cut off by the edges of the screen. I had no setting in which I could fix this. No other games had this issue, so I know it's not like a default thing with my screen. It wasn't really a major problem, as most of the command prompts showed up, but it was just still one of those things that separates great games from average games. One area where the devs did really do a good job at hitting all the marks though was the core gameplay mechanics. The movement system was fluid, even with all the different speeds and methods of movement. The UFG wasn't completely game-breaking, and wasn't a complete requirement for moving around most of the time, which is a blessing for somebody who is the most accurate in shooters. The gameplay was a bit more realistic than in most modern shooters, as evidenced by the assist mode, but it also encouraged players to adapt in order to maximize damage. In order to hit crit points or weak spots, zooming in was an absolute must. But my only real gripe with the gameplay was the balancing of character levels. This might be a result of my playstyle, but there was also times that just my level was just beneath either one or two levels the recommended, or and everything I was fighting was pretty much coming close to one hit downing me every time. But there was also times when I was at the recommended level and everybody was just a pushover. Take the final boss fight. I maybe spent 3 minutes to finish off the second half of the battle because I was too powerful despite being at the recommended level. Now, this isn't just a problem that affected Fatal Bullet, as I suffered the same type of thing in Hollow Realization, and I'm pretty sure Lost Song as well. Customization is also another area where this game shines. Unlike in the previous SAO games, your outfit doesn't really affect your stats as much, which I really liked. I always found it annoying when I had to when I really wanted to stick with a particular style, but the best armor I had looked like trash. Hollow Realization saw me trying to balance style with capability, but I mean later on they did add the fact that you could just they added I forget what it's called, but you just pay 2,000 coin and it allowed you to keep one style of outfit on, where you could change the underneath armor. However, and it was just annoying before I had that option, was just because the whole rest of your party members would be able to wear the same outfit the entire game, and it didn't really affect how they progressed or what their level their stats were, but you couldn't. On top of that, the actual customization of your character model is also the most in-depth out of the entire series. The introduction of sliders helped make it where your character was a bit more unique, and the addition of far more hairstyles meant it was less likely that you saw two similar players while walking around, sometimes even right next to each other, which was an issue in Hollow Realization, and I just laughed at it because it was yep, unique, you're different players, good job NPCs. I just want to have one more final observation before I get critical once again, was that your player height actually affects your cover usage here. I maxed out my height and made it so that, and I made it where that the upright wall cover that they give you is actually too short to block off all of my character's head. And the enemies will exploit this fact, so be aware of that, just as a warning. Finally, we've come to the conundrum that is Fatal Bullet's AI. In a brief statement, they're morons. There's so many examples which I could use to explain this issue, but I think none is better than watching Ray run into the base of an artillery piece for about a minute or two, despite only needing to take 3 steps to a right in order to bypass the gun and revive me. Yes, the AI seems to struggle with basics like routing or understanding optimal weapon usage and range. There are times in which enemy melee units are trying to charge me, only to get stuck on stairwells either by foe or, even worse, one of your party members on the stairwell. However, if your party member is face-to-face with an enemy in that situation, neither side will try to fight each other. Instead, continue to focus on the person that they were trying to fight earlier. Other times, your allied sword users will opt to use their blades, even if they need to charge a couple dozen yards to get to their close to their target. The AI also just seems to love using blades in general. I equipped Rey with dual SMGs and the sword pistol combo. Sometimes I even forgot that she had the submachine guns because I almost never saw them. Philia also did the same thing when I used her as a party member as well. The enemy AI is just as bad, but for other reasons. First off, I didn't say this earlier, but the enemy variety is minimal. Most of them are just reskin versions of the baddies that fill the various dungeons and fields, particularly the first one. You see the scorpions, the bees, the automatrons. Yeah, that's about it. Those three classes are pretty much just reskinned of each other. Now, back to their AI. The problem with most of them is that the enemies don't respond well to just running loops around them. For most of the difficult fights, all I would do is just circle around the enemy with near perfect results. The only time that I had issue would be when they get like this really cheap bullshit hit in, and then just start comboing using the same move over again about 3 different times. The PvP gameplay with the AI was actually worse than the monsters, most notably during the Death Gun fight and the Basalt Joe fight, where all I had to do was spray my gun. Death Gun, I even managed to glitch him at the range where you couldn't decide whether to use his rifle or S-Stock and just kept swapping. The worst AI, however, of all is in the instances where the AI elects not to move when you engage in combat with them. This happened several times, from the giant hovering ball enemies to the big squadron duel where I just safely stood at the entranceway and just shot. And that was even facing like Sinon with a sniper rifle. Instances like these should never happen, or maybe once if maybe you have enough distance between your foe, but realistically it should never happen. But it did several times. Overall, this game feels like it might have been rushed to release about the same time as Gun-Gale Alternate or the rebroadcasting of SAO2. So many details were missed that would have been fixed given more revision time. I can't say that I dislike this game though, because I did enjoy it. However, I can't say that it was a great game either, like I would have said about Hollow Realization. Well, what does that mean? If this is a starting point for a spin-off series of SAO games, then sure I would buy more because the setup is there, though it's a bit messy. If this is an indicator of what's to come for the main entry SAO games, then I would be a bit less optimistic. There are too many flaws, most of which came from handling Kirito and company, and I'm not sure how much of it I could take. It seems a bit unfair, but the previous devs in the games that they made were overall better, so I prefer to avoid a Sonic-like progression if possible here. With that all being said, I would still give the game a 6 out of 10, which is a bit low for a fun game, but there are just too many states to justify giving Fatal Bullet anything higher. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you're interested, I did stream my playthrough of the game, and it is in a playlist, but I'll admit it's a bit long, 34 hours, if I did my math correctly. So, to counteract that, I'm working on a condensed version of the story, aiming for roughly 3 hours long, if everything goes well, but I'm obviously not sure yet. Also, because the ending fight was blocked, I'm going to add it to that version, along with some voiceover of the dialogue bits just to make it sound more natural, and some commentary filled with jokes. So look forward to that, which I plan having done here soon, hopefully within a week, but it might take 2 because I'm relatively busy this time around. So subscribe if you're interested. That will probably be the next video that comes up. So yeah, see you later, fluff balls, scaly things, feather balls, whatever else you could describe yourself with. Anyways, well, bye.